welcome to the Weekly Rushes, your rushed rush through the weekly rushes, your one-stop shop for movie and streaming news. And whilst previous weeks have been occupied with controversy, off-screen shenanigans, obviously the Johnny Depp trial we've been reporting on and talking about and analysing and reacting to elsewhere on the channel. I'll pop a link up there somewhere. But this week there's lots and lots of kind of chunky future film news because it was CinemaCon in Las Vegas this week. So all the major studios descend upon Vegas and they all stand on stage and they give us little teases and little trailers and little clips and little tidbits, all that sort of stuff that you can't see online, but will land online. We just can't see it online, which is frustrating. So we know that it's there, but we can't watch any of it. But before we get into any of that news, there is an update, or there have been updates to the Alec, Baldwin, Halyna Hutchins shooting story. Less developments, though there is one that I think is a little bit a cause for concern. But I just wanted to watch this with you. I was shown this footage actually by one of my girls this week, and it's quite shocking actually. It's the moment that Alec Baldwin was told by the Santa Fe Police Department whilst being interrogated or interviewed, let's say, when they actually said to Alec Baldwin that Halyna Hutchins didn't make it, i.e. she sadly passed away. So his response is quite something, and I just thought it would be interesting to watch with you.
I do have some very unfortunate news to tell you.
What?
She didn't make it. Yeah. So Joel's still at the hospital, but the other person involved didn't make it. Sorry. I just didn't want you to hear it outside of here. Is there something we could do for you?
I want to go my way.
Of course, we could even give you privacy.
I don't want to go.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
I want to go.
No, that's fine. Can I get you more water or anything? Do you want to give you guys a few minutes in here?
I want to go my way.
Oh my God, what a moment. I mean, it's interesting because, of course, that infamous photo of Alec Baldwin on set on the phone, you know, we all just assumed, or I assumed certainly, that he knew that it was a fatal shot and that he was on his phone on set, sort of talking to people with the shock of that. I mean, obviously there was the shock of shooting her, but I thought perhaps they already knew. So that was the moment he was told, and, you know, his hand goes naturally to his heart. Now, interestingly, or rather worryingly, the footage that's been released by the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff's Office said that concerning information has been found on text messages during their investigation. So I've got a feeling that there's more to come from this story. Baldwin is fighting a number of lawsuits, principally coming from the family of Miss Hutchins and the head of lighting, as well as the script supervisor. And I think the script supervisor was the person who put in the first 911 call. The other great, big, weird story of the week actually happened at CinemaCon, and it involves the actress and director Olivia Wilde, who is being much reported as going out with and being in a relationship with Harry Styles. Significant only for the fact that Harry Styles is obviously in her new film, Don't Worry Darling, which also stars Florence Pugh. There's a lot of excitement around this film. There's a lot of anticipation. Obviously, Olivia Wilde was the director of Booksmart. That was that brilliant sort of girls' own comedy, which you just don't get too often. It was really, really witty and really funny. But she was in a marriage relationship with Jason Sudeikis. He's the star of Ted Lasso, the series about an American guy managing a British football team. Obviously, they're in the process of divorcing. They're also in the process of securing custody or shared custody, we don't know, of the children. But in an astonishing moment, while she was on stage, again at the Coliseum, talking about her movie, and she was handed a manila envelope. It was slid onto the stage, saying private and confidential on the top of it. She said, "This is for me." And she opened it, she had a look in it, but she said Nothing. She said nothing. Obviously, lots of people have approached Jason Sudeikis's people to see if he had any awareness of this. Sudeikis's representative said that he had no prior knowledge of the time or place that the envelope would have been delivered, as this would solely be up to the process service company involved, and he would never condone her being served in such an inappropriate manner. Someone pointed out actually this morning on Coffee Moaning that more often than not, when you have these odd occasions where notices are served or documents are served on someone, it's usually because it's been impossible to do it before. I don't know if you remember, there was a whole case of them trying to serve Prince Andrew and he wouldn't come out from behind the gates or the fence and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this was quite a dramatic moment. They've been separated since 2020. They have 2 children together. They were engaged but never formally tied the knot. So actually it's not about divorce proceedings. It's actually about custody of the children. Imagine that. Imagine holding yourself together whilst you're served this incredibly personal document in front of all your peers in the industry. Another sort of spat that developed earlier in the week was involved Chris Pratt, the star of the soon-to-be released Jurassic World Dominion. Obviously the star of Guardians of the Galaxy, the franchise, and he's obviously shooting at the moment Guardians of the Galaxy 3. There was a bit of a Twitter campaign to get him removed from his role as Star-Lord, with some sort of people suggesting that perhaps he could be replaced by Patrick Wilson, the actor Patrick Wilson. Quite a few people piled on, and the reason for this pivots around the fact that there's the suggestion that Chris Pratt is a member of a church that promotes gay conversion therapy. This was, you know, so it's an anti-gay church, which in and of itself is funny, because like I read somewhere, someone suggested, well, if you judge an individual upon the church or belief they belong to, you're pretty much going to have to castigate most Catholics on the planet, aren't you? Let's face it. I mean, you know, the Catholic Church has got up to all sorts of terrible things in the past, as has every other form of church. Anyway, James Gunn was having none of this, and he's had experience of being cancelled. Let's not forget he was cancelled for an inappropriate joke tweet posted many years ago, and that got him removed from Guardians, went to DC, and now he's back. But James Gunn replied to this tweet or this Twitter campaign by saying he should be removed for what? Because of your made-up, utterly false beliefs about him? For something that someone else told you about him that's not true? Chris Pratt would never be replaced as Star-Lord, but if he ever was, we would all be going with him. Very strong defence of Chris Pratt there. And James Gunn doubled down on this. He even said, I know the church he currently goes to. Do you? The answer is you don't, but you heard from someone who heard from someone who heard from someone where he goes to church, so decided, yeah, okay, I'll believe this terrible thing I heard online about this celebrity. And it's true. So much of this cancelling and prejudgment. I personally haven't read the J.K. Rowling articles, but I do think there's a lot of prejudgment that goes on, a lot of prejudgment. Which brings us to some of the more sort of, you know, what's being made, what's being shot, who's being cast, what's being commissioned, what, you know, what's to come in the movie and streaming pipeline. Michael Mann, the director of Heat. I remember liking Heat. I think, did it come out in '95? I was in my mid-20s. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. I seem to remember thinking it was pretty good. It was pretty slick. Michael Mann is shooting a biopic, essentially, of Ferrari, and he's in Italy currently setting up for pre-production. This film, Ferrari, stars Adam Driver, it's got Penelope Cruz, and it's got Shailene Woodley from Big Little Lies. Adam Driver's playing Enzo Ferrari. It's not the first part that Adam Driver's had. He was playing a Gucci, now he's playing a Ferrari. And if I have any concern with this, it's that it's potentially going to go, I just hope it doesn't go down the sort of pantomime route that I felt House of Gucci went down. This is a film that Michael Mann has been wanting to make for 20 years, best part of 2 decades now. Shailene Woodley plays his mistress. Penelope Cruz is obviously playing his wife, and as I say, Adam Driver is playing Ferrari himself. Stranger Things star David Harbour. We've got a huge soft spot for David Harbour here. You know, since we've had him in Stranger Things, since he played Hooper. Is it Hooper or Hopper? Hooper? We love him, we love him. Anyway, he's been cast in a new film called Trashers, and Trashers is directed by Cooper Raiff, who's a bit of a darling at Sundance. He had success with a new movie starring Dakota Johnson called Cha Cha Real Smooth, which has been picked up by Apple TV, so he's a bit of an indie darling, and this film, Trashers, sounds intriguing. I'll give you the synopsis. It charts the rise and fall of Jimmy Galante, a Connecticut trash magnate and associate of the Genovese crime family. In 2004, he bought the city's minor league hockey team, and he assigns his teenage son to run it. The team gained notoriety for their rough and violent style of play, but also developed a wide fan base as they began to win more and more games. The team's success and fame came to an abrupt end with Galante's arrest on 72 criminal charges. So I think it's going to be a bit of a gangster movie. It's going to be parked within the world of sport. I like that. I think that could be good. I think David Harbour, he was brilliant, wasn't he, in Black Widow as the sort of Russian version of Captain America. So he's got heft. He's got a sort of heavy-looking head, hasn't he? His head looks like it's just so heavy. We've all been wondering, well, I've been wondering, is Batman 2 coming? Is it coming? They haven't announced it. But of course, Warner Brothers have been holding back on the news. It's been announced at CinemaCon that yes, Batman 2 is happening. Robert Pattinson is returning. Matt Reeves is redirecting. This comes after the original movie the Batman has made a really good, strong, but not staggering or stellar $760 million. That said, I think that's a pretty good trawl of cash for a film that's actually very long, very dark, much more sort of nibbling at the edges of the Joker territory. And it's also been watched by 4.1 million households on HBO Max. So it's doing pretty well. It's beaten films from Warner Brothers like Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman 1984, Tenet, The Matrix Resurrections, and Dune, and even Dune as well. So Matt Reeves took to the stage at CinemaCon and he said this: "Thank you for all your tremendous support for the Batman. We couldn't have gotten here without the faith and enthusiasm of all your teams around the world. I'm super excited to jump back into this world for the next chapter." And so alongside Batman, all of the major studios went to CinemaCon and basically said, look at this lot, this is what we're showing you. They kind of opened their jacket and went, what do you like? What do you like? So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was there promoting Black Adam. He said on stage, "Black Adam is one of the things in my life that gets me out of bed. I think the hierarchy of the DC universe is about to change." Yeah, I think a lot of stalls being put in old Black Adam. So I think watch this space. I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's about to shake things up. Warner Brothers also went to great lengths to show clips, trailers, and all sorts of tidbits from obviously Black Adam, but also the new Elvis film by Baz Luhrmann starring Austin Butler, Wonka, the new film starring Timothée Chalamet, The Flash, which is obviously features the slightly troubled in Hawaii actor Ezra Miller, Shazam, Fury of the Gods with Zachary Levi, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Jason Momoa. Bit of a touchy subject, that, given that old Amber Heard is in there. Apparently, if I think I've heard correctly, that they've really cut down her role in the film. It'd be interesting to see what happens to her further down the line. And obviously, as I was saying earlier, Don't Worry Darling, the Olivia Wilde, Florence Pugh, Harry Styles film. So there was a lot for them to talk about. Austin Butler, talking about taking on the part of Elvis in Elvis, had this to say: "The main thing I set out to find was his humanity. He's one of those individuals that's been lifted up to such an iconic status that he's almost superhuman." I mean, I think Baz Luhrmann went on to say that, yes, he's actually the original superhero when you look at his narrative arc. Timothée Chalamet, he came out, he was there showing some clips from Wonka, his new musical. He's going to be singing. And given the unbearable weight of massive talent, where they keep talking about how brilliant Paddington 2 is, the director of Paddington, Paul King, is directing Wonka. And Wonka also stars the likes of Rowan Atkinson, Sally Hawkins, and Olivia Colman. So it's quite a stellar cast. A brief trailer for The Flash, as I said, starring Ezra Miller, caused all sorts of high levels of excitement. I don't know about anyone else. I'm not sharing the Flash excitement. I mean, admittedly, it allows us to indulge in Michael Keaton playing Batman again. And apparently at the end, Ezra Miller's Flash asks the question, "Are you in?" Well, I mean, are you in prison, Ezra, for throwing things at women and gashing their foreheads open? I think that's the bigger question. They shared a brief look at, as I say, the Aquaman sequel. Jason Momoa phoned in. Director James Wan said that with developments in technology, their underwater aquatics sort of special effects are going to be even better than the original film. I went in not expecting to like Aquaman, the first film, and I was pleasantly surprised, though I wasn't overly impressed by the special visual effects, if I'm honest. So I'm kind of encouraged that they think they've managed to make things look a bit better. As I say, Zachary Levi, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, follow-up to Shazam, which I really enjoyed that. I thought I must admit, I thought the follow-up was going to go straight to HBO Max and streaming. But again, this movie centres on a teenager named Billy Batson, who transforms into an adult superhero and gets help from his friend and foster brother, Freddie Freeman. And briefly, away from her being served with custody custody documents from Jason Sudeikis, Olivia Wilde managed to share some comments on Florence Pugh, who stars in her Don't Worry Darling film, which sounds like a sort of spin on the whole kind of Westworld, Stepford Wives, Truman Show type shtick. She says of Florence Pugh, Olivia Wilde, "You are seeing the birth of a fully fledged movie star." And she describes Stiles, who's obviously her boyfriend, a revelation. She also says, "I am also in the movie because I was the only one we could afford when we got to that point." That's quite nice. That's sort of self-effacing kind of aspect. Are you an Avatar fan? We didn't like Avatar. It was long, it was bloated, it was incredibly blue, wasn't it? Incredibly blue. We had the most sophisticated 3D glasses that kind of almost wrapped around your head. I don't know, it was so, I was begging for something real. It's just, everything felt CGI'd, so it felt like you were just, it was a bit cartoony. Anyway, lots of people obviously loved it. It's one of the highest grossing film of all time on the planet. But Avatar 2 has been given a title, and it seems that all things watery are all the rage at the moment, aren't they? It's called Avatar: The Way of Water. Obviously James Cameron is busy filming it, so he couldn't be at CinemaCon himself. And the producer of Avatar had this to say: "At the centre of each of the 4 sequels," so hang on a minute, Avatar 2 isn't going to be the only one. You're going to Avatar 2, 4. So I've got Avatar 2, 3, 4. There's going to be 5 Avatar films that you string together. Anyway, he had this to say: "Each story, each film will be a standalone, and each will come to its own conclusion. There will be a fulfilling resolution to each film, but when they're looked at as a whole, the journey across all 4 will create a larger epic saga." And like James Wan with Aquaman, James Cameron was saying they're pushing the limits even further with higher frame rates, higher resolution 3D, and greater reality in our visual effects. I mean, if you get any clearer, it's going to tear our eyes out of our forehead, isn't it? Another sort of standalone movie that was being promoted, Viola Davis, the wonderful actress from Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and Fences, she's sensational, she's also in Suicide Squad, has released the trailer to The Woman King, and I think this is a really important film. This is a historical epic movie that she's been wanting to make for years, and it pivots around the true events that happened in the Kingdom of Dahomey, one of the most powerful states of Africa in the 18th and 19th century. Davis plays Naniska, and the images for this look incredibly impressive, inspiring. And I think this, a little bit like Black Panther, but whilst Black Panther is in obviously a fictionalized, kingdom of Wakanda, this is straight out of history. And I think this is going to be a really important movie in the African-American cinematic sort of landscape. I think it's really important. And I think, it's really important to remember that prior to white people ravaging the continent of Africa, there were kingdoms, there were fiefdoms, there were kings, there were queens, there were royal families, there were communities, there were civilizations prior to ours. Just because we didn't recognize them doesn't mean they weren't there. And I think this will go some way to rectifying that. Talking about the project, Viola Davis said, the 5 words I don't want to take to my grave would be: I was not brave enough, that I didn't risk discomfort, failure, exposure. There is a whole generation of people who want to be in the story, she said. It also stars John Boyega, who plays King Gezo. So I think this is going to be incredibly rich. Meanwhile, Paramount revealed all of their kind of movies that they're going to release. Top of their pile, to be brutally honest, is Top Gun, obviously, Top Gun Maverick. I think they actually screened the whole film there. They showed some clips and some bits and bobs from Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Never been a Transformers fan, have you? It's just too Transformery. I liked the movie. What was the movie that had the kind of yellow car? I can't remember that. Sort of like a yellow beetle or something like that. I like that. That was quite good. So Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. There was a few shots and clips from the Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which we talked about last week, starring Chris Pine and Regé-Jean Page. I think lots and lots of people are going to be excited to see him in a suit of armour, though they'll probably want to get the suit of armour off. But the biggest, most exciting thing that they were banging on about Paramount was Damien Chazelle's new film, Babylon. He directed La La Land, and he directed First Man, and I believe he also directed Whiplash. This film has an all-star cast, quite a cast. Margot Robbie plays an iconic actress called Clara Bow, and Brad Pitt is in it as the silent film star John Gilbert. Tobey Maguire's in there as Charlie Chaplin, Max Minghella's in there, Samara Weaving's in there, and Olivia Wilde is in there too. And it's a sort of 1920s tale set in Hollywood. I really fancy that. Though I have to say, I think First Man was a bit of a flop, and it was a bit boring, wasn't it? It was about Neil Armstrong, wasn't it? Or the first man in space or something. Alongside all of that, Paramount also announced the fact that Mission Impossible 7 is officially called Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's getting very confusing with all these franchises and all these series, Part 1, Part 2, so presumably we can imagine that the next film's going to be Mission Impossible. Will it be Mission Impossible 7 still? Dead Reckoning Part 2? And are we not running out of sort of dramatic vehicles or architectural structures for Tom Cruise to jump off, hang off, attach himself to, fly, crash? I think that's why one of these films is going to be set in space. So Mission Impossible 7, it was given its title as Dead Reckoning Part 1. A Quiet Place, there's a spin-off for A Quiet Place. We're also in the land of prequels, aren't we? But the particular detail about this prequel that excites me is the director they've got on board. So the prequel is called A Quiet Place Day One. It gives you a clue. So whilst A Quiet Place was A Quiet Place, then a sequel to A Quiet Place was set after it, but it had a flashback before A Quiet Place. This is Holy Place before A Quiet Place. Bloody hell, it gets confusing. Sometimes you just think, oh, just make all the films and then we'll watch them in the right order, or the order that you want us to watch them in. But what excites me about this is it's directed by the director of the Nick Cage film Pig. If you haven't seen Nick Cage's film Pig, it's brilliant. It really is brilliant. One of Nick Cage's greatest performances. And the director of that, Michael Sarnowski, is attached to this, and it will be about an entirely different family to Emily Blunt, and presumably it's going to be about the sort of that initial encounter with the aliens in some way. One of the problems I think A Quiet Place has got, like most franchises that are around monsters and horror and aliens, stuff like that, is once you've seen the monster, does it stay frightening? And I think this sort of adage, this aspect of, you know, holding it back, as Hitchcock and Spielberg were so good, hold back the horror, hold back the monster, it really starts to creak when you get into sequels and trequels and all that kind of stuff. This next project really warms me. It really warms me. I don't know if you remember the documentary An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore authored documentary. I think it won all sorts of awards. Well, the filmmakers of that are making or shooting a documentary on the life of Michael J. Fox, and Apple TV have picked this up. As with any documentary, it's going to incorporate, you know, documentary archival scripted elements. Michael J. Fox is going to be voicing it himself, telling his own story, you know, how he sort of came from a Canadian army base and hit sort of staggering heights of stardom in the 80s. Interestingly, I think when he was cast, I think for Back to the Future, they originally had an actor. Do you remember an actor called Eric Stoltz? I think so. It was quite accidental. There were, as with any career, there were many accidental moments and junctures in his career. But of course, we were all totally sort of poleaxed by the news that he was, at the ripe old age of just 29, I think he was, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so it will chronicle, you know, the triumphs, the difficulties, the struggles that both him and his family have had to endure, if you like, across his later life. I think that's going to be a really tender film. There's something about Michael J. Fox. Did anyone ever notice this? But Michael J. Fox, he would always do this. He'd leave a scene by sort of walking and then skipping and hopping backwards and out of the room. It's kind of like a motif of his. Pete Davidson has managed to leave Kim Kardashian alone for a bit. He's pushed her aside. So, Kim, get off me. Stop counting my tattoos. Stop counting my tattoos. Peacock, the streamer, the channel, have closed the deal on Bupkiss. Yeah, it seems that everyone is wanting to do self-referential series or films about their own lives. Nick Cage, perfect candidate for such self-referential stuff. John Malkovich, obviously being John Malkovich, happened many years ago. Well, Pete Davidson, this is Bupkiss, is a series produced by Pete Davidson, which features a heightened, fictionalized version of Pete Davidson's life. Kind of what he did in The King of Staten Island, where a lot of it was very autobiographical, that movie too. They say that this is going to include some pretty absurdist comedy. It's going to be pretty unfiltered, perhaps quite explicit in its comedy, drug taking perhaps, and sex. It's being described as a sort of 18 certificate version of Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's soon to be seen in a horror thriller called The Home. I think there's a photo on the Popcorn Junkies Instagram of him coated in blood. He's in another horror film called Bodies, and he's in a movie called Meet Cute, which is a rom-com with Kaylee Cuoco from The Flight Attendant. Dune, The Sisterhood, is another streaming series that's landing. It's being done, a couple of the episodes have been directed by the director of Chernobyl, the series Chernobyl. This series, Dune, The Sisterhood, which has the sanctioning, if you like, of Denis Villeneuve, who's directed Dune, the movie. Dune, The Sisterhood is based on Frank Herbert's novel. It's set 10,000 years before Paul Atreides, who's played by Timothée Chalamet in the movie. And it follows the Harkonnen sisters as they combat forces that threaten the future of humankind. And quite something that, again, quite an old, Frank Herbert wrote these books quite a while ago, the idea that actually this is about strong women leading a sci-fi story. Mike Myers, where's he been? Where's he been? Well, he's coming back and he's got a new Netflix series and it's called The Pentavarade. The Pentavarade. What is it? The Glitterati? No, the Inserati? The Nitterati? What's it called? The sort of the group of people that everyone thinks sort of controls the world. I think this is kind of a spin on that. It's the Pentavarade. He's the Pentavarade is a comedy miniseries for Netflix anyway. And this is the story or synopsis. What if a secret society of 5 men, the Nitterati, the Glitterati, what is it? What if a secret society of 5 men has been working to influence world events for the greater good since the Black Plague of 1347? As this new series begins, one unlikely Canadian journalist finds himself embroiled in a mission to uncover the truth and just possibly save the world himself. Mike Myers plays no less than 8 characters in this, so I'm presuming that he plays possibly the 5 men who've been controlling the entire world. It's satirical, it's funny, it's got Rob Lowe in there, it's got Jennifer Saunders in there too, and Lydia West, and that starts streaming on Netflix on the 5th of May. Tom Hiddleston, he of Loki. I've got a big soft spot for Tom Hiddleston. Apart from that odd moment where he was kind of having a bit of a thing with Taylor Swift, that was curious, wasn't it? He's to star in a new mystery drama for Apple TV called The Essex Serpent. It's based on the Sarah Perry novel, and he's a sort of man of the cloth. He's a sort of priest or, you know, a sort of religious type, but he's troubled and concerned by rumours of there being a mythic serpent-like creature that's intimidating or traumatising local townsfolk. Set in Victorian England, The Essex Serpent follows London widow Cora Seaborn, played by Claire Danes, she of Romeo and Juliet, etc., who moves to Essex to investigate reports of a mythical serpent. She forms an unlikely bond with the village vicar, Hiddleston, but when tragedy strikes, locals accuse her of attracting the creature. Is she a witch? Is she a sorceress? Which brings us to films of the week, and I have to say, of all the weekly rushes we've done, and I think this might be number 28, this is the poorest week of film options. So I've only got 2 for you, I'm afraid. One of them is Downton Abbey, A New Era. Oh, ding! Now, look, I know Downton Abbey is very popular, but I think even Downton Abbey, we watched the first series, we enjoyed it. But I think it's outstayed its welcome. You've got The Crown now, you've got Bridgerton now, and whatever you think of Bridgerton and The Crown, they're head and shoulders above the rest, aren't they? So Downton Abbey, A New Era. Julian Fellowes' machine keeps on going. This is set around 1928-29, before the Wall Street crash. Obviously it stars Michelle Dockery, Maggie Smith, being a grouchy old woman again, and Elizabeth McGovern. And the blurb runs, the Crawley family goes on a grand journey to the south of France to uncover the mystery of the Dowager Countess's newly inherited villa. Personally, I couldn't give a monkey's jollop on this, but I'm sure it's going to be a bit of a crowd pleaser, so if you fancy a bit of costume drama escape, that's your treat. The only other film that I can see that might be of any interest this week is a movie called Casablanca Beats, which The Guardian refers to as Morocco's answer to Fame the musical. It features a whole bunch of non-professional actors, which often means that, you know, it's quite a nice element to it. And the brief for this states, Anas, a former rapper, starts working in a cultural centre. Encouraged by their new teacher, the students try to free themselves from the weight of traditions and express themselves through hip-hop culture. There you go. So there you have the weekly rushes, a rushed rush through the weekly rushes. Tell us what you think of the stories, tell us what you're excited about, and I hope you have, even with just those 2 paltry offerings of movies, I hope you have a fun, film-packed weekend.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.